Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this session on the dawn of the demo engineer. As I always do, huge shout out to the pre-sales collective, James and Yuji specifically, who we've partnered with for quite a while now and really enjoy it. So thank you so much. And we're going to give it a second for folks to trickle in. Folks are putting down their coffee or finishing walking the dog like I was just a little while ago. So we'll give them a couple minutes. And if folks don't mind, tell us where you're from. You should see the comment wall somewhere here. Go ahead, let us know where you're tuning in from, and also why are you here? Like, what are you looking to learn? Are you a demo engineer? Are you looking to add a demo engineering organization? So just a couple of things there. And then just some housekeeping things. You'll see a couple polls pop up periodically throughout today's event. Also, you'll see a Q&A function here at the bottom. So go ahead and click on that. Sometimes the chat gets nuts and we can't kind of keep up with the questions that are being posted. So the Q&A function is a great way to keep that going. And then lastly, we're going to continue this conversation in the pre-sales collective. So we'll be collecting topics that folks really enjoy, and we'll go ahead and kick it off, that conversation around whatever particular topic we want to dig into in the Slack community. So if you're not in the Slack community for some reason, go ahead and sign up to that as well. So as I mentioned, we'll go ahead and give it a couple minutes here. Wow, we have folks tuning in from everywhere. We have Greenville, South Carolina, Stevens Point, Wisconsin, India, Hyderabad. I hope I didn't butcher that. I apologize. I remember that. Like, I'm very familiar with that city from obviously not a pronunciation perspective, but I know there's a lot of tech startups over there. So shout out to that community. Long Island, New York, looking to potentially create a new role for demo ownership. Awesome, Daniel. Thank you so much. Well, you have the folks here, I won't intro them yet, which you'll see here in a second, but we have some folks who are real innovators in that category. Orange County, nice. I used to live in San Diego. Really love that area. Of course, Bend, Oregon, our partner in crime, Alex. Nice, cool. Argentina, can you believe it? We have Argentina here. I love it. I love Buenos Aires. I don't know if anyone's been in Buenos Aires, but between the wine and the churrascos and the tango, boy, good times. And the mate, that's right, Matias. The mate is great. NYC, so Warren from NYC Villanueva is looking to, or he's leading a team of demo engineers looking forward to the session. Thank you so much, Warren. If you have any questions, like, these folks have been there, done that. There's some rumors around the fact that Todd coined this term. So we'll dig into this a little later. But if you do have any questions, go ahead and click on that Q&A, and you're literally talking to some of the best in the world. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Folks, thank you so much again for joining us for the dawn of the demo engineer. Super excited to really be with some of the best in the community. Alex, if you can go to the next slide. So some introductions, just so you know who's yapping away. My name is George, or Jorge, or Jorge. I was named after George Harrison. If you've been to a webinar I've done, you've heard this story, but I head up content and community. So I create a lot of our content on social media, and then do these types of events and try to drive conversation and add value to folks in our various communities and third-party communities. Todd, why don't you kick us off a little bit? You have really a unique title, right? Some of the coolest titles I've ever seen. Q Branch is straight out of one of those 007 movies. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do at Salesforce?
Yeah, so Todd Janzen, I co-lead Q Branch. I have a partner in crime whose name is Ashley Brewer. She really heads up the scale side of the house. So when you think about scalable demos and the tools that help reduce demo prep, she owns that side. I'm really focused on the deal side of the house. But QBranch is exactly that, right? It's the tools and the demo environments that help keep our SEs, in front of customers and not at their desk configuring. And for the biggest deals and our most important deals, QBranch is really about kind of taking a skill set that everyone assumes an SE has, but doesn't necessarily have. And so QBranch, you can think of, we're kind of like a digital agency within sales. We have developers, we have designers, we have video editors, video producers, strategists that help advise people with their biggest deals. So really kind of a behind the scenes team. And that's where QBranch comes from. Q short for quartermaster. And in the Army, the quartermaster arms the troops. So it's kind of a perfect metaphor for what we do. And so in a nutshell, that's basically what it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. And Todd, you're being a bit modest here in that, like, I've literally heard that you invented this function. And so thank you for doing that. I don't know if you want to dig into that a little later, but thank you so much for your time. Anjali, you've really been one of the early innovators and adopters of this demo engineering function. You were the global head of demo engineering at Medallia, and I know now you're moving on to your next adventure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your career and kind of what you're up to now, and also what are you looking to do moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So most recently, as George mentioned, I was leading demo engineering at Medallia. One thing that George might not know, we also had a pretty cool title, and this team for the longest time was called SWAT, and it did what SWAT stands for until very recently when we renamed it to demo engineering. And this team comprised of three main functions: build and maintain all demos at Medallia, so 12 plus verticals, 20 plus product lines. This team also provided technical support to sales, right? So think about customization requests or maybe assets for creating a video asset, right? Or just, some expert opinion on certain product for a very specific sales cycle. And the most recent addition to this team was a POC arm. So my team served as product manager for POCs, and we also led delivery of those proof of concepts.
Awesome.
Very excited to be on the panel. Yeah. And I think, George, the second part to your question was what I am going next.
Absolutely.
I hope to be in a very similar role, and I'm hoping I can share details in coming few weeks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those intros. Just for folks out there, just some context here, like VCs tend to invest in really innovative and growing spaces. And we've seen tens of millions of dollars invested in this category in pre-sales, whether it's RFP softwares or workload management software like Vavoon, or of course the product demo experience software space like us, Reprise here. We're really starting to see pre-sales or sales engineers, solutions engineers, et cetera, really getting some love from investors and from entrepreneurs who are building these solutions. So today we really wanted to dig in, whether you're someone who's aspiring to be a demo engineer, or maybe sort of like some of the folks in the audience, you have a demo engineering team, but you're looking to take it to the next level. You're definitely at the right place here today. So we'll dig in here. Todd, quick question, like for folks out there, what is exactly a demo engineer?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I'll give everyone a little bit of a background. So 13 years ago, I was a solution engineer. And at the time, we came out with our own programming language at Salesforce. It was called Apex. And all of a sudden, I went from being in front of customers a lot, point and click configuration of demos, to hacking code. And I was at my desk and I was really pissed off and frustrated because I was spending hours every day trying to hack code, and it just wasn't my strength. And really, that was the napkin idea right there. It was, man, I worked with this guy, Brian Young, who could hack code, and occasionally he'd help me with my biggest deals. And that was it. It was like, there should be a team for this. And that's what kicked off this concept of demo engineers. And I think a couple weeks later, my boss at the time, Greg Tate, listened to me and he's like, hey, you've got 5 heads. Let's go try this thing out. Next thing you know, I'm a manager, I have no idea what I'm doing. And away we went. But I think, really the best way to describe the role is deeply technical, right? So kind of developer grade technical, but maybe doesn't want to work on product, right? And likes the fast pace of sales, likes the fast pace of like maybe working on 3 demos in a given day, maybe 3 demos in an hour, depending on what you're working on. So it's deeply technical, but I would also say there's a social aspect to this role, right? And that's, we'll talk about what we look for later, but kind of the social developer is what we look for.
And folks, just thank you so much for that, Todd. Folks, we'll be putting up a poll here in a second, so keep an eye out for that. Todd, how does this sort of, what's the distinction between a demo engineer and, like, let's say SEs, especially now where we're trying to kind of figure this thing out, and historically SEs have done demos, right? Like, how deep do like an SE go into, or how deep will SEs go into demos now when you also have a demo engineering team?
Yeah, so an SE is like part social, part technical, right? And pretty close to an even blend. Some are more technical than social and whatever, right? But I think if you look at a demo engineer, they're going to start out being heavy technical. But kind of behind your question, a lot of them become SEs. They become solution engineers. So it's a great entry point into a company. It's a great entry point into pre-sales. And so you get product expertise. Like, you are so dangerous as a demo engineer, like 6 months into that job. You are going to know the product. And then for those that are interested, like, that path for solution engineering is pretty clear. But what I love about the role is I've had demo engineers going to product marketing, devs for our actual product. I've had some, obviously leave Salesforce and go be entrepreneurs and start their own businesses. So it is just a killer gateway, I think, into any company and any technology. And then where you go from there, it's pretty diverse. But I've seen amazing talent go into be some of the best SE leaders and SE talent inside Salesforce.
Now, you joined, speaking of Salesforce, you joined in 2005. I mean, you've been there for a good portion of the journey. What would you say has sort of been sort of the profile of the SE back then, and how has it changed, like, to date?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the product was really simple. I think when I joined, custom objects had just come out. And so the product was simple. Our territories were vast. I was flying all over the US. And you were really you were really of a jack of all trades. And that was easy back then because the product wasn't super complex. And I think as we've grown as a company, and any of you out there that are growing as a company, that gets harder and harder, especially when you're trying to hire, and you kind of look at the list of everything you need your SE to do. And at some point it gets unrealistic. And so, kind of plugging this message in here, one reason to create a demo engineer team would be to take away some of those requirements or those things that everyone expects their SE to do. And essentially that's what QBranch is, right? We took this idea of demo engineering, we were taking the technical component off the plates of our SEs, and QBranch just did that on different levels, such as video, right? AEs go to their SE, hey, let's go create a nice video that we can send to the CEO and prospect in there. Okay, some SEs are good at that. A lot probably don't want to do that, right? And so it's that kind of concept that's formed QBranch, but just specifically back to demo engineers, looking back on it, what I think probably one of the biggest assets of the company is we opened up the aperture of our SE hiring profile. When you took away that requirement to code, think about how much bigger our candidate pool got. And I didn't know that at the time, but I think in hindsight, when I look back at that, that's a pretty amazing thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Anjali, we're seeing now the demo engineering category kind of like about to explode. Why is that happening? Like, what's your opinion on that? And you're on mute. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, I really think it's because of two things, right? First, just so much focus on product-led growth, right? More and more companies are talking about product-led growth. They are adopting it. And with that, I think demo assets, thinking about it, it is just an important piece of that whole puzzle. And second, I think there's just so much more awareness about the role and the value it can add to your pre-sales organization. When I first moved into this role 5 years back, this was a very atypical role. I didn't know what this role was called at other companies. But I think now there is so much awareness, right? More and more companies are hearing about it, adopting this role. And again, I think the credit goes to just the big shout out to PSC for creating that community for the overall pre-sales team, which is an important piece even for demo engineering, I think, right? Because demo engineering is part of that pre-sales community. And then just so many startups, right? Like Reprise, for instance, those are coming up, making lives of this team easier, and also adding the awareness about what this function is about.
Now, I know you've dug into the research. How many like demo engineers are there out there right now? And like how many of those are like sort of de facto demo engineers?
Yeah, so George, I was actually just looking at it a few days back out of curiosity as I was looking for my next opportunity as well. And like if you do a quick search on LinkedIn, about 400 plus would crop up in terms of the people in this role, right? And that's amazing for me. Even to find somebody with the same title is a big start, but now you have hundreds of people getting into the role, and that number is rising, right? That number was not 400 like 6 months back. It was maybe 100, 200. So yeah.
I mean, that's really great to see. And, if we think about kind of Todd, this one's for you. What roles do the demo engineers play at Salesforce? Like, how do they, interface also with other organizations or teams?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's evolved a lot over 13 years. You know, very much in the beginning, we were a behind the scenes team, kind of working hand in hand with SEs, kind of getting the request, building the things, getting it back. And what's been really incredible to watch it evolve is because we're so deep in the product, we see these patterns. And so the DE role has evolved at Salesforce quite a bit. And there's two new roles that have really emerged that are super cool. One is a role we call technical strategy or technical consulting, and the other one's called app engineering. And these are demo engineer like roles, but they're our most tenured and senior DEs. And historically, it's like you get super dangerous, you're an amazing DE, and then you felt like you had to go get another job somewhere else because you want that next leap in your career. One thing we've really focused on is like, how do we keep people in Q branch, and how do we make this a destination organization? And so those roles are helping with that. But the technical strategists, because they know the product so well, they see the patterns across these industries. SEs want to pick up the phone and talk to them and consult with them first before anything gets built. And what I love about the role is it's still deeply technical. It's not like, hey, we're going to give you some advice and then go find someone to code it. Like, they're going to give you the advice and they're going to hack it, which is awesome. And the app engineer is similar, right? Also deeply technical, also looking at patterns. But what they're doing is looking at the patterns that we see and saying, wow, that seems to be a gap in our product. Let's go build something in production, put it on our app exchange for customers for free. And I love that role because they are listening to what competitors are doing out there and the FUD competitors are throwing at us. And they see that and they go, let's just create an app that just eliminates that. We can have that functionality. And a couple of weeks later, it's out there for free on the app exchange. So that's been a little bit of the evolution of the role, which has been just amazing to see.
I love that. So you can literally start to build out these applications based on what's happening in the market, what prospects are are really needing. And that's really amazing because, if you think about me in the sales role in the past, if I think about like, oh, I need this solution built, and maybe it's out of the scope of my immediate product, I was basically done. So this is really cool. Anjali, from your perspective, anything that you saw at Medallia? Of course, we love Medallia, and congratulations on that, on all the success you've had there. Anything that sort of stands out, like from your perspective, maybe on an average day?
Yeah, just a few things. So first of all, this is the first time that Todd and I have actually met, but what he said just resonates quite a bit. We went through similar phases in my previous company. And when I started the role, it looked quite different to what it is probably now, right? So before I go into just the day-to-day, I really think like different companies are still figuring out what the exact responsibilities of the team are. In a lot of companies, when you think about demo engineers, the first thing that comes to mind is build a demo environment, and that's it, right? But I think this role is so much more than that. And in my opinion, based on my experience for the last 4 or 5 years, we were shifting from that to really looking at your end-to-end sales cycle or customer journey, right? Based on the scope of the team, and then really figuring out what demo assets you need. It could be a live environment, it could be a walkthrough, it could be a proof of concept or a video asset, but I think you really need to look at it end to end. But at the core, in a very layman's term, what demo engineering is, they are like stage managers, right? It's a very, very cross-functional role. They work with different teams internally to give you the demo assets, right? And enable the revenue generating teams, client facing teams with whatever is needed to put on that show, right? And so they work closely with product engineering, marketing on one hand, right? Figuring out what the go-to-market plan is, what the product strategy is, and then they closely work with your solution leads, SC leads on the other hand to craft the demo assets that are required. And establish that two-way channel between the product and sales teams.
I love that, the stage manager. Quick question, Todd, for you. What was the ratio between demo engineers and SEs today, and has that changed recently?
It's changed a lot. And I think it used to be around 20 to 1, kind of back in the day. And it's something I look at quite a bit. And we've seen that get pretty lean over the last few years, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If you think about Salesforce, for anyone that knows that platform, we have 3 releases a year, so it's getting better 3 times a year. We've gotten more focused on industries. And so I really see that as a function of the product, and kind of why that's happening. So 20 to 1, I think was, is pretty good ratio. I think, if I had to guess, maybe 25 to 1 now, but Anjali was just kind of saying this, the role is so diverse. And so we started with demo engineers, and then it was like, someone should build a tool that makes loading data a click of a button. Hey, demo engineer, why don't you go take that on as a project? Next thing you know, there's a new role within QBranch, just focus on tools. There's a new role just focused on demo environments. And so I think it's important that you might start with some of these roles, but you need to evolve them, and you need to evolve with the business. And that, I think, is a hallmark of what QBranch does. And do not rest on what you did a decade ago, because it changes fast.
Awesome. And just a reminder for folks out there, if you do have any questions, I see a couple of questions have come in. Just go ahead and click on the Q&A function here on the screen and submit your question. So Anjali, if you were to think about the demo engineering's operating cadence, what would you say that it looks like today?
So again, I don't know what other companies are doing. Before I took on the leadership role, it was pretty ad hoc. There was one thing that I think I'm very proud of what worked for us was get into a regular operating cadence, right? And what we did was we really treated our demos as a product. So in fact, we had a demo QPR quarterly, which aligned to our product QPR. Because anything that product releases doesn't mean that it needs to be demoable. There are certain features that are more that you have to have a demo for, right? So we had a prioritization for that. And because it was a global team, that QPR was our opportunity to plan and make sure that all regions and verticals are taken into account for, and put the new features, new offerings into our plan for the quarter. But really, because we were treating it as a product, we ran it as just a normal product or a software development life cycle, right? So it starts with design, right? You figure out the key personas and the use cases. You create a RACI chart and a project plan. RACI chart, for people who are not familiar with it, it's figuring out people responsible, accountable, consulted, informed in a process, right? And because this role is a very cross-functional role, it's not that demo engineers are working on something in isolation. So you need to get buy-in from these different teams. And in design phase, it's important to get that buy-in through a bit of more project management tools. But once that is done, it goes to the regular phases of a software development cycle, right? So build, test, iteration, launch. And after launch is really about tracking the adoption, bug fixes, and efficiency. One thing I will say, and I learned it the hard way, focus, and especially for people who are building this team, focus on tracking, right? It's very, very important to track the adoption of these different demo assets and efficiency. So although we were focused too much on execution in our early days, we soon realized that if we have to grow this team, and just like any other team, right, you need to kind of have the metrics associated with you. Now, it could be win rate by a demo asset, conversion rate for the deal, for POCs, for instance. Also getting feedback, both from internal and external. So internal, your pre-sales sales team on demo environments, as well as why not send the survey on just the demo that you had to the prospects to get, did it resonate with them or not? And then I think it was really hard to track some of these things, because if you don't have tools to build this tracking in place easily, depending on the asset you use, you kind of feel lost sometimes. But the great thing is, with all these new tools coming up, like Repres or other tools like Pendo, I think they're making whatever walkthrough you have or whatever you have, they give you all these analytics that can help you figure out where you want to focus on for improving the demo environments.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, let's go ahead and shift in gears into more tactical stuff like building a new D function, hiring, comp, that sort of stuff. Todd, what are the foundational steps required to create a new demo engineering team?
I think there's really two paths you can go. You can just do the kind of secretive, I'm just going to launch this thing and not really tell anyone about it. And I think you can do that if there's someone existing on your team, maybe in a pre-sales role. They like the pre-sales role, but maybe they like the product a little bit more than the people. And so that's someone who you can just say, hey, why don't you just focus on these types of things? Why don't you focus on the demo environments or the tools, or just kind of being behind the scenes, helping with the more technical demos. So I think that's one way to launch it. The other way to launch it is to go ask for investment. And that might look a little different, but where you could start would be to maybe go to your CRO or go to the head of sales and talk about how much time your SEs are not in front of customers. I like to joke, put together a report of how many hours your SE spent coding, and go up to your CRO or your head of sales and go, I want to show you this awesome presentation on how much time our SEs were coded last quarter, and see where that conversation goes, because that is not where we typically want people spending their time. So I think there's two approaches. I like the quiet experiment route myself. Let's try this. Let's keep it quiet, and then when it's successful, talk about it a lot.
And of course, folks are always wondering about compensation and also like how do we measure impact? Are there any particular KPIs? I've heard quite a few sort of answers around this, but anything that sort of particularly stood out for you?
Yeah, and believe me, we've looked at every KPI to try and measure impact and value and all that stuff. I think at the end of the day, you got to figure out a way to tie it to ACV or revenue. Period. I think it's important to look at some of the other KPIs like hours spent and how much time spent on certain deals, but I don't think those are the primary metrics. And the reason I say this is I feel like it cheapens the role. And let me explain that. A role like demo engineer is about skill augmentation. It's not staff augmentation. If you're listening to this today or you're hearing your leaders going, hey, we just need cheaper bodies to help us build point and click demos, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what demo engineering is. If that's a route you want to take, there's value in that. You should start a program like we did at Salesforce called the Scout Academy, where you bring in, young talent, you groom them to be solution engineers, and while you're grooming them, they're helping with the point and click stuff. Huge value there, but that's not what we're talking about today. So skill augmentation, and here's why I don't like hours. Because if your SEs can't code, well, what does it matter, right? Like, your team can code it in an hour, SEs can't code. The value of that is well beyond just the time spent. And so I would just caution with hours and time spent on things because it's not doing your team justice. I will say this: if anyone in your company can go grab a resource like a demo engineer, those close rates and that ACV or revenue numbers will start to just mirror whatever your pre-sales teams are doing. So I would say you should have some limits on who can engage a team like this. If it's a free-for-all, your demo engineer close rates are going to look just like your SE close rates, right? Because you're just mirroring whatever they're working on. It's when you pick and choose, and I saw a question earlier about like enterprise deals and stuff like that. If you're able to discern what's a good deal versus a bad deal and where you should spend your time, that's when you'll start to see your close rates better than average. You'll see it better than AEs for sure. I think the goal is to be on average better than what SEs traditionally do. And so I think those are some smart areas to look for KPIs.
Awesome. Anjali, I know, of course, Salesforce is Salesforce and a massive market cap and just really, obviously one of the biggest software companies in the galaxy. But if you're sitting back at an organization and you're trying to kind of justify the investment in a new demo engineering function, and, maybe folks are perhaps really digging in and being a little more conservative, any sort of ideas that you would share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it goes back to a little bit of what Todd mentioned a few minutes back, right? You really need to quantify the business impact of having such a team, right? So I'll give you two examples, which I have seen in some companies, right? Maybe the first example is what Todd was referring to, right? So maybe your SCs are spending, I'm just making up 5 hours on each new like sales cycle, creating demo environments. So you need to be able to quantify that time saved that will increase the productivity and give that time back to the SE. The other example that I have seen is maybe your demos are just failing. And if they are failing, at end of the day, they are slowing your deal cycle, you're losing revenue, and you should be able to quantify that revenue. Maybe there was a deal that you lost because of just a bad, one after the other approaches of not having a good demo environment, and maybe a competition is doing it. So again, I think quantifying that number is really, really important. That's what I think is going to help you get the buy-in to create a new D function. Other thing I would just add to it is, even when you have a D function, there is always this case of like, how do you make business case to add new headcount on this team, right? What is interesting about this role is really like a contact center for your pre-sales and sales, because you get a lot of requests from different parts of your organization. And if this team is set up properly through appropriate tracking, this can help you uncover those pain points, what's working, what's not working. And based on that, you should be able to create a business case to grow this team.
Awesome. Speaking of building teams, Todd, what skills or traits do you look for in a potential demo engineering hire? And any opinion on non-traditional hires versus like, you know, maybe is some like special skills or sniping competitors, Ds, that sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. Real quick on just what Anjali said. Man, the KPIs and justification for these roles is really hard. It is the hardest thing you do. It's the hardest thing I do as a leader. And you know, a lot of organizations just understand the equation of adding more AEs adds more revenue. And so just to throw it out there, and Angie, I'm so glad you brought it up. You got to kick and scream. You got to fight, because people just aren't. It just doesn't follow the traditional equation. So, little truth there. But yeah, you know, I think I said it earlier. We look for the social engineer. We look for the social dev. And you know, I used to go on campus to some of the top universities in the country, and I was just looking for eye contact and a firm handshake sometimes. And you know, someone that could just talk about anything and kind of check the box on technical, like that's a great fit. But you know, I think, you know, consulting is a great area to look. You know, former devs, people that are just like, oh my gosh, I'm just so sick of working on this one product. I want a little faster pace. You know, people that are looking for that, they're looking for more of a sales education. Those are great candidates. We don't do a lot of poaching of other DEs from other companies. Feels like that's happening a lot to us lately, but you know, we grow our talent here, and it's paid off really well.
Awesome. Well, folks, we're going to go ahead and transition into the Q&A section. So this is your time. We're going to do this for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up at about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. So this is your time to go ahead and click on that Q&A button and submit the questions. We're going to kick off with answering Alex Steinwach's question. So I'll go ahead and read that question out to folks. What cost center do you hire building demos at scale and demo support? And are they the same cost center or different?
Yeah, I mean, we've historically rolled up through an SE cost center, but I don't know if that's that critical. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, because we've historically been a role that serves SEs, that makes sense. I will say a lot of the evolution of QBranch is not just working with the AEs, it's working with the entire account team. So I wouldn't be surprised someday if we're in a different cost center, because we're just serving a different audience, but that's historically where we've been.
For us too, I think that's how we have been. We rolled into pre-sales always. So traditionally it was that. But I think when you have a little bit more scale, and especially if it's like bigger projects, for instance, we had to invest quite a few amount of dollars to get some data for scaling. I think we were shifting it to see, would it make sense for the industry cost centers to pay for that piece?
Actually, let me throw something out here that I think the audience will like. And it goes when you go to make the justification for this role. And especially if you're bringing in kind of younger talent out of university and things like that, try and get an agreement early on with your finance leader or CFO to get a 2-to-1 ratio. So if, you know, let's say you're going to hire an SE, say, look, I can go hire 2 of these demo engineers. I'll just tell you from a cost perspective, it's not that simple, right? And you know, I'm not saying that these folks really cost that much less than an SE. They shouldn't, because they're some of the most valuable people in your organization. But that will help you seed this, because at the end of the day, what's really, really hard about this is that the business goes AE, SE. Okay, fine, we'll hire an SE. And then you've got this problem of SE, demo engineer. And at the end of the day, someone's like, well, that SE's customer facing, they're going to be driving revenue. So you need that kind of unfair advantage to build a program like this.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next question, also from Alex. And how do you prioritize which demos at scale to build? What sort of SLAs do you provide to SCs for demo support?
Great question. Yeah, go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, Alex, is the question about how do you prioritize which standard demos need to build, or is it specifically about scaling?
I think it's and maybe Alex, if you want to maybe chime in here in the comments real quick, but I think I understood it as like, are some of them comprehensive? How big? How small? How many types? That's what I think Alex might be saying. But maybe Alex, you want to clarify there?
I might just weigh in and say, like, someone has to look at TAM. You have to look at total addressable market or something like that.
Yeah.
To prioritize where you can spend your time.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Alex says you have limited capacity. How do you prioritize that? Okay.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Todd. You start there first, look at the TAM for that particular thing. If sometimes you know that as a company you're making an investment in particular sectors or markets, right? So it warrants for a bit more support from the demo engineering on that side. But I think one of the other things that I have think has helped is just looking at how many SCs are actually going to use it, right? I have been in place where it's like only 1 or 2 SCs are using it. So maybe it's fine, they have their own environment and they can do it, but maybe demo engineering can help like a one-time thing, but we don't need to invest to create a full-blown demo engineering because we are just getting started on that side.
Awesome. So next question from Colm Daly. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thoughts on how to balance the quote unquote field side of demo engineering, so working active opportunities, versus the reuse side. So this meaning focus more on tooling, demo environments, et cetera. And the urgency of one tends to outweigh the longer term need for the other.
Yeah, so this was the exact problem that we were facing a few years back, because I remember when I first joined in this team, I felt like I was getting nothing done. I would have something planned and then every day something urgent would come in and I would work on that, right? When I was an IC in this team. One thing that we did was that's why planned the work for quarterly. So I had a certain capacity within my team, which would say, okay, we are committing to this capacity for these scale sort of projects to invest in creating standard demo environments. And then we left 30 to 40% of capacity for providing support. And whenever we reached that threshold, what we did was I worked directly with the SC leaders to let them know of the trade-off. That, do you think we need to provide this support? Is it important? This is the trade-off. We are not going to have this scale project.
It's such a good question, because that is the two sides of QBranch. It's the scale side and the deal side. And I would say if you had to make an initial investment, you have to start with scale. Otherwise, you're just going to keep throwing bodies at it on the other side. And so start with scale. I often say my team on the deal side, the team that's working the deals and getting the requests from the AEs and the SEs, we stand on the shoulders of giants with our scale team. Because if it wasn't for them, the starting point for us to customize a demo would be an additional 10 to 20 hours if it's not just there when we go to work. So I think you start there. You got to make sure, that's an easy investment.
Awesome. We spoke to this a bit earlier around measuring impact, but Pablo asks, how do you measure the impact of the particular demos? So I don't know if that's maybe something that's done in Salesforce or the CRM. Anjali, anything that you saw that, sort of worked well for you?
So this was definitely very, very hard for us to do. I wish I had an easy answer. I think what we did was, I don't think we had a very well-defined process like a tracking for us, but I think what we did was we will regionalize and verticalize. So I think we worked very closely with the SC leads to understand the impact and see a bit more, I guess, just subjective, but getting their feedback on the impact of demos constantly. But again, I think demos as in demo environment, that's what happened, right? But I think we were looking to get this a bit more in terms of other demo assets. For instance, proof of concepts, we are tying it at the opportunity level. Just because our systems were set up, it was easier to do that, to figure out how impactful these proof of concepts were.
Yeah, so we've been down this path at Salesforce, and I'll just skip to the ending on this. The ending is, at some point, these scalable demo environments are going to be the de facto standard in your company. Every demo is going to use these. So whatever your revenue number is, that's the number associated with that demo environment. We've tracked it, right? We would ask SEs to say, hey, what deal is this related to? You run the numbers, and at the end of the day, it's like some incredibly unbelievable number that no one's going to believe. So let me just cut to the chase and just say, it's going to be directly tied to your success. I think there's a more interesting question, and that question is, what SKUs or what features are SEs showing in their demos? That, I think, is a much more interesting question, especially as companies make acquisitions or come out with new features. You know, SE leaders want to answer things like, hey, we had spiffs, we had all this effort around this. Were people actually showing it? Were our customers actually seeing it? You know, are our SEs staying current? So I think
I completely agree, Todd. And what did you do to track that? Did you just have it like at the deal level? Were you able to have some, like, SEs had to make some sort of selection?
So obviously we've built a lot of our own tools and things at Salesforce. So I think just any kind of basic analytics tracking, right? Yeah. I think you could even use something like Google Analytics, or, you know, plug in your favorite. But I will say that this category of you know, demo environments and making them available to customers, that kind of comes out of the box with a lot of them. And I think that's the killer feature right there.
Awesome. We'll go ahead and answer one more question. And then as a reminder, folks, the link to the Slack community is in the chat. So don't forget to check that out. We're going to take the questions that we didn't get to and bring them over and continue the conversation in the community. So do keep that in mind. Just real quick, one last question before we wrap up from Cam. I just heard the mention of data scaling, like creating fake data for demos has always been a challenge for us. What tools do your demo engineering teams use to create demo data? Anyone want to take this one?
A big challenge for us. We have had multiple paths from manually creating and tweaking the data, which is really like hard work, right? And to kind of using third-party agencies to scrub the data, especially if it's more like comments, unstructured data. And for some of our product, that was needed, where you spend a lot of money. We have used scripting to help that populate some of the data too. So no easy answer, at least I couldn't figure out very easy answers, but I think there are tools, some open source tools that now you can use. And I think just, again, the companies that have come, like Reprise and DemoStack and other companies, I think they are changing that data trends behind the scenes much easier.
Yeah, at Salesforce, we've built our own, and some of these tools have been around for 14, 15 years now. And they've evolved, and we try and give them clever names. So just for a little humor, like, I think the first one we ever created it's called the Org Customizer, and it was all about that. We created something called the Perfect Date Wizard, which used to get everyone excited because they're like, oh wow, maybe I'll find a date outside of work. And it's like, no, this is like, just makes your dates good in your demo environment. And then there's like this really killer tool that's kind of like the tool to rule all tools that we call Click Click Boom. So we've built a lot of these over the years.
Yeah, I think same for us. We have built like scripting for some of these, but the hardest ones I have found is the comments data, to get it good, sanitized, custom, like no sensitive information data. It's a problem.
Awesome. Well, there were a couple of questions here that came in that I think we can answer quickly. And from Jim Thomas, have you offshored any parts of your demo engineering team? And then also, Daniel Berg, are demo engineers generally part of the sales team? I know we sort of spoke to that earlier a bit, but sometimes you're seeing like product marketing kind of like involved in some organizations I've seen. Todd, any feedback on that?
Yeah, I flew to Hyderabad, India. I think we were talking about Hyderabad right at the beginning of this call. I flew to Hyderabad, India over a decade ago to start a team there. And I have just an absolutely stellar team there. And I have teams all over the world. And some of that's just very strategic, right? It's not just about costs. It's about talent, and it's about follow the sun. And I will just say we can turn demos around really, really fast here at Salesforce. And there are days I wake up feeling bad for our competitors because it's all by design.
Yeah, we had a very, very similar team, very strong offshore team that helped us, who were the manpower behind all the work that this team does.
Awesome. And in terms of where demo engineering teams should sit, are we all in agreement that probably keep them in sales?
Yeah, 100%. If, there have been employees of mine that go over to marketing and product marketing, very similar in kind of what they do, but very different in focus. We are very deal focused and ACV focused. That's what we wake up every day thinking about. And then the teams over kind of in marketing or product marketing, they're thinking of big stage events. They're thinking about, what we show to the press. And so similar in role, similar in function, very different focus.
Awesome. Would you agree, Anjali? Was that sort of where it sat?
I was thinking about it, right? So I think I agree and disagree to a certain extent, both.
That's
right?
okay, by the way.
And I think for certain company, I think for most companies that's true, right? But I think it really depends on how your teams are structured and how strong some of these other teams are. I also think there is a bit of overlap in some of the skill sets needed in those things. I ran into a lot of things where it was outside my original scope, which was pre-sales, where people would come to me and from PS or partners, but it was really based on how the team was structured. So I think it really comes down to how the overall teams are structured at a company. I would also make a point where demos are needed, not just in pre-sales. They have an important piece, even if you're upselling to a customer. You might have to do a POC. You might have to need POCs for partner or alliances. Now, if some of those things, if they roll up to the same head, I think very good. But otherwise, I think it comes down to like what you're owning, right? Is it really the sales journey of a prospect, or are you owning the demos for the customer's journey?
Awesome. Thank you so much for this. Very, very much appreciated. I guess if folks want to follow you on social media, maybe get in contact, pick your brain, or maybe join your teams. And I know, Anjali, your upcoming team, is LinkedIn probably the best channel?
LinkedIn should be the best possible channel, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm waiting on my work permit to come through. So hopefully I can make it public soon.
Awesome. And Todd, I'm guessing probably LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you started this at the beginning of the call. There is a renaissance happening in pre-sales right now. And, pre-sales collective, thank you, right? It started 18 months ago, I think, with kind of that. But the products, like there are apps just dedicated for our space. There are VCs throwing money at this space. So there's an absolute renaissance happening. Let's get connected. Let's all make this thing happen.
Absolutely. And just real quick for the folks out there, we're going to launch another poll. So if you can, go ahead and complete that. A couple things, absolutely check out the Pre-Sales Collective Slack community if you haven't seen it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And again, the best community of its kind. There are quite a few events coming up, so do check that out. If for folks who maybe missed some of this is going to be on YouTube, so definitely search YouTube, check out the replay of this video, and then of course we will be continuing the conversation on our favorite platform, Slack. So do keep that in mind. Todd, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. Anjali, good luck with your next adventure. And for
Thank
the
you.
folks out there, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. On behalf of the Pre-Sales Collective and Reprise, Alex, myself, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.